Join channel here over on Subscribestar. Thanks to Vegan and Frog and everyone else for their donations over there. So, credit to Crowder for what it's due. He does a lot of high energy YouTube presentation where he's doing, the Prove Me Wrong series or something. He goes to college campuses and he does a lot of skits. And what if you've been paying attention to YouTube over the past several years, you listen to it, and those kind of videos where people do that high energy thing where they're leaving the office to make videos, that kind of lost a lot of energy. It faded out because, well, one, it got too dangerous in a lot of cases after 2016. But two, even when Tim Pool was doing that kind of stuff, traveling around the world, doing this kind of like Vice videos, that was popular at the time. And then he quickly discovered it eventually was costing him money to go out and make these trips because he was making more money just sitting in a studio reading the news. So you got to give credit to, I mean, but the thing is, it does help give you some street cred and blow up your channel for a little while. But after a while, you realize, like for all these kind of things, Crowder goes out and does that, the prove me wrong kind of thing. He said tonight in the interview, it cost him $50,000 to do that because the setup and the tech and the security, just to do a simple segment like that. Well, that's how much money, shows bringing in so much money. But, does it bring in more money than if you just sat in a studio and just did studio stuff? Honestly, you'd probably make the most amount of money if you got rid of all the skits and you were just doing what Tim Pool does. He just reads the news in the studio, or with Crowder do a group thing, bouncing ideas back and forth, and then do a live stream once a week for the super chats and stuff. So, credit to him for going out there and doing some of those hard things. So louder with Crowder on Tim Pool versus the machine. The right wing, the real right wing, is rare. Then there's the corporate right, and there's a sliding scale of ConOps Incorporated. Now, if you don't listen to either one of these guys, you probably this is the one time to go back and hit the replay on this. It's a 2.5 hour stream. It's interesting to hear what they're saying, and it's interesting to hear what they're talking around. So Daily Wire is the worst. It's not the right or conservative in any way. It's a left-wing business association that is operating in the right-wing field. And some people are saying, oh, this stuff should happen behind the scenes. This shouldn't be public. And no, by all means, it's time to shine a light on all this kind of stuff. This should all be public. People should know who they're dealing with. The Daily Wire is not working for what is best for America. They have interests different than I don't know if American interests, or they have a political agenda that is not an American nationalist agenda. They're on a different page than I think most of their audience, as is all the mainstream right-wing media, Gateway Pundit, Post Millennial, PragerU, all those kind of con ops right-wing media where, yeah, they're vaguely on the right, but they're very tightly constrained with where they are. They're not moving the needle. Well, they're moving the needle slowly left because they're not moving it to the right. And people kind of rely on these con ops media, and they think it's like, oh, it's conservative media. No, it's not. It's controlled opposition media. Do they do good work? Yeah, for sure. Matt Walsh with his What is a Woman series, that was a very important video series. It caused I think that definitely caused some light bulbs to go off to the people who heard it, because they were exposed to how the left wing actually thinks and how scared they were when they were asked that question, what is a woman? Because they knew they'd be fired if they answered in a way that would upset the puppet masters. People needed to see that, and that was a very solid video series. So yeah, Matt Walsh did some very good work on that. But then at an event, he was asked a reasonable question by some kid in the audience that he refused to answer. He deflected from the question. He said he wouldn't even address the issue. Well, that's not a conservative position to not answer a question, but he wouldn't answer the question because he's controlled by the machine, by all the other con ops right-wing people are controlled. Yeah, he does the good work that he's allowed to do, the peripheral, the penultimate work, but it's never the important key issues, the stuff that actually matters. Charlie Kirk did something similar when he was asked by the Groypers, which is the Nick Fuentes thing, about if conservative values included the BLT agenda in cruder terms, because according to Kirk, that is a conservative value, except that it's not really talked about. It's just kind of slowly slipped in where you have BLT speakers at conservative functions. So at one time, they probably were no BLT speakers at conservative functions, or they're in the closet. And then at some point in time, you crossed this Rubicon where there were BLT people started to be openly associated with conservative functions, like at the Charlie Kirk function. So I'm trying to say, like, there's a point in time where that line was crossed, and it never really got a bunch of discussion. It's not like they had a Vatican II thing to discuss this sort of thing. Is that part of conservative policy? Because most conservatives, I don't know if they're on board with it or not on board with it, but they want to have an open discussion about it. They don't just want to be presented with a fait accompli. But deflecting from a frank, open discussion is not what conservatives do. That's smarmy, slimy behavior. That's left-wing behavior. So what exactly is the right wing? We don't want these backroom deals. We want things openly discussed. Forgive the crudeness, the question asked was something like, is back hole relations a conservative value? That was the crude question that Groypers asked, but it was effective, and we want an answer. Like, is that the new conservative value? This was probably a couple of years ago when they asked that of Charlie Kirk. I'm sure you can find the video on social media somewhere. But it's important to kind of like ask these really blunt questions to Charlie Kirk and Matt Walsh, these people who are purportedly on the right. I don't want to see anyone on the right deflect away from a question ever. That should never happen. Like, Kirk and Walsh should be humiliated that they had to deflect. You should know, like, that should have, like, everyone in the room should have stood up and said, what the hell's going on here? You're a conservative, but you're being asked these questions, and like, you don't have an answer. The fact that neither one of those guys had an answer is an answer, obviously, in itself, and everyone saw that. So are we American first or something else? Are we a Christian-based nationalist organization? And I'm not saying we should be or shouldn't be. But it's like, these things are just kind of left unspoken, and I think it's that's some of the good things that some of these groups are doing. The American First group is one of them. Is that they're putting this stuff out in the open, saying this is our dogma, this is what we are. And then these other groups are kind of the, what was that, Lord of the Rings, the coat of many colors. It's like they're all things to all people. And they're kind of, it feels very slippery when they're not being honest about exactly what their values are. And the thing with the BLT thing, it's like, that's not really my issue. I don't think I care either way, but it is an issue that it just kind of slipped up into conservative incorporated, where like at a certain time it wasn't accepted, and then it became accepted. It's like, where did they cross that line? What happened with that? It's like it slowly happened. There was no discussion about that. It's like, well, that should set off a lot of alarm bells. So, like, are we trying to be all things to all people? What was that, the gray cloak or the white cloak? Steven Crowder is important, and so is Tim Pool, to be fair, but in the future, I'd say Steven Crowder probably has the potential. If anyone's going to start a media empire with a real passionate following behind it, there's potential with Crowder. So jaded people call them all, Crowder, Tim Pool, they call all that kind of right wing, and Daily Wire, all ConOps, but they are definitely different. Steven Crowder is moving in the direction of doing something that matters, of creating an alternative marketplace and community. He's not based or anything, but he is starting to go down the rabbit hole. The Daily Wire is designed to keep you away from the rabbit hole. There's a big difference there. And hey, it would be great if Crowder would talk about people further to the right than him that were deplatformed and, had their lives destroyed by the machine. The Vincent James and the Nick Fuentes and all those other people who used to be on YouTube when it was before Trump got elected. There was all these like real right-wing people on YouTube who later got kicked off, and they're on Odyssey and Shing and Cozy and all these other kind of platforms now. And it would be nice to see the right wing does one thing really well, is if there's somebody who's a millimeter further to the right than they are, they'll immediately sell them out to virtue signal to the left. It's the most pathetic thing ever, because the moderate left doesn't disavow the far left, but the moderate right will disavow the far right. It's like, you're never going to win like that. And like, why do you think the window is constantly shifting to the left? Because the kitty cats in the moderate right are constantly selling out anyone who's a millimeter, a hair's breadth further to the right than them, or says something politically incorrect, or something, some kind of blue humor or something. So you're very comfortable splitting your party power, but the left wing doesn't do that. It's like, yeah, that's why the left wing constantly wins. They've always won. It's like, oh, wings of the same bird. Yeah, but it's flying to the left. It's like, oh, this election is so important. No, go look back over the past 100 years and tell me if you think the ball is really bouncing back and forth between right and left. It's always going left because the right doesn't have the stones to stand up for anything. They just slowly walk to the left. So Crowder is still in the safe zone, but he's moving out of the safe zone. He's talking about how dirty the conservative media sphere is, how they don't want to grow a movement, how they want to control the narrative, number one, and grow the media empire, their own personal private media empire and their finances, number two. And it's at the point now where post-millennial gateway pundit, Daily Wire, PragerU, and a bunch of others are actually the enemies because a traitor is worse than an open enemy. They and the ConOps right are not pro-free speech. They've got taboos and sacred cows that must not be mentioned, or things that they're just not comfortable talking about, like the BLT position in the conservative party. Like, where exactly do we stand on this? Or where exactly, I want to know where exactly these speakers stand on it. And then they start getting nervous and deflecting. It's like, oh, buddy, that's not, if that's a movement that needs a reformation. If to see Matt Walsh and Charlie Kirk just squirm away from these questions, there's a problem there because it means someone else is pulling your strings, or you don't feel comfortable answering these questions. It's like, let's address this issue first and foremost. That was one of the powerful things about the Groypers, is they just stood in the line and they're asking these uncomfortable questions, and people didn't have answers to them. It's like, why don't you have answers? Why can't you answer their questions? Matt Walsh said, do I even really need to dignify that with an answer? Yeah, you do. Why wouldn't you just answer the question? That's a political answer when they do that deflection and squirm away from an answer. It's like everyone in the audience should have stood up and go, what the fuck is going on here? Why aren't you answering these questions? You're just openly saying that someone else is pulling your strings and we want to know about it. Anyway, so this right wing in quotes has a lot of stuff that must not be mentioned, and don't say anything in the comments because this isn't my platform, it's Google's, which is probably the reason they bought YouTube back in the day, so they could get control of the narrative. The right wing isn't the right wing. It's not completely broken, but it is sick. It's as sick as its secrets, as they say. It needs a bright, disinfecting light shown in all corners because right now it's got a lot of sick, secret, naked emperors and elephants in the room that everyone is ignoring, but it's becoming just too painfully obvious. One of the things they mentioned with right-wing social media are things like email lists that should have attached to the creator as well as the company, perhaps, or things like shared creative control over intellectual properties that they created. They should all be upfront about all this kind of stuff with the end user and not buried in the legalese at the end of the end user license agreement. If you're on an email list and you think you're supporting Crowder, but actually it's in control of the Blaze or Daily Wire, that's shady. And these quote-unquote right-wing media companies have way too many shady coincidences associated with them. If you want to grow a movement and not an individual company, then you're going to have to start thinking differently. To think of the jural entity, the corporal form differently. To stop thinking of these things as just publicly traded companies for the point of seeking return on investment. If you want to grow a movement, then you got to entirely change the form. You got to entirely change your headspace, but also the form of these business associations into something different. And don't get me wrong here, I don't think Crowder is there yet. He's only on the cusp of the rabbit hole. And it's, as Upton Sinclair said, it's hard to convince a man to something like learn the truth where his payment depends on not learning the truth. And, and he's looking at, just stupid amounts of money in the future if he forms his own media empire and it takes off. And I'm looking at the horizon for him and I'm looking at the competition and, I don't think Crowder. I think he's underestimating himself a little bit, unless that's just kind of an act he's putting on. You never know with these people. He's the guy right now. I mean, look around at his competition, and when you stack them up, like then the biggest thing, like Daily Wire is bigger than Crowder. Daily Wire, Shapiro, and all his associated people are bigger than Crowder right now. They're a media empire with very deep pockets. But you look at the future and you see the kind of the pathways of Daily Wire versus Crowder. And it's got to be 80% of the energy is with Crowder compared to Daily Wire. So if he starts his media empire, it would very well catch on, and people would look at the two back and forth, and you look at Shapiro and you look at Crowder, you're like, yeah, I'm with Crowder all the way, for the hope that he, moves further to the right in the future. But you look at Shapiro and you realize, like, yeah, Shapiro's just it's just a business to him. This is just a way for him to control the narrative, to keep people from getting anything, doing anything important, keep people as distracted as possible. You look at Crowder, it's like, yeah, there's energy behind Crowder that, even though Daily Wire is probably 50 times the size, in terms of market cap, if not more, and these apparently have very deep pockets. The future is with Crowder in a way. It's like with Elon Musk on Twitter. There's a certain energy that he has that the other tech companies don't have. Where, like, if you want to come up with the Tesla phone or the Twitter phone or something, he could probably make it happen because people look at him and go like, okay, this is a guy that's going places. It's kind of the same thing with Crowder. He has a lot of that energy behind him. There was over 150,000 people watched on a Tim Pool live stream. So that was, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 times what his live streams get. Like, people are tired of having this. People in the right wing are tired of having the wool pulled over their eyes, and they look at these right wing media sources and realize, like, this doesn't feel like right wing media. This all feels like controlled opposition. It feels like it's just puppet masters pulling strings to more puppets. Something's wrong here, and Crowder is starting to touch on these kind of these issues. He's raising important issues for people, and people, the way snowballs work is it might go further than even he wants it to go, because people, once you drag something out in the open, it kind of takes on a life of its own, which is what should happen. People should not just accept blindly these Daily Wire, Gateway Pundit, Post Millennial, PragerU, Project Veritas, Babylon B, and whatever else, these kind of things that are vaguely on the right. It's like, it's time to really take a look at these people and these companies and go, wait a minute, what exactly are their values? Or all these other, the Charlie Kirk type of movements, or the Dan Crenshaws, or I guess the equivalent of rhinos, but in the social media sphere, to figure out, like, well, what exactly are their values? What exactly is Ben Shapiro and Daily Wire's values? Because everything that comes out, like with these hidden recordings of him, it's like, it doesn't seem like the people who listen to him are really aware of what their values are. And I think if they knew, they probably wouldn't be listening to the Daily Wire anymore. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys all next episode.